This month, we're talking about something that trips a ton of couples up. Nathan, that's you.
Sorry, I wasn't listening.
Let's get into that. Hey, I'm Andrea Warnock.
I'm Nathan Warnock.
And you're joining us for Marriage Monday on the Marriage by Design podcast. Marriage Monday is a time where we talk about God's design for marriage and how we can practically live that out.
That's right. So this month, we're going to talk about, as Andrea said, I was listening, something that trips a ton of couples up that we've had the opportunity to meet with over the years. And that is the idea of communication within relationship, right?
Yeah.
Not even just marriage, dating relationship. Communication's a big deal, and it's something that can really easily get screwed up. So this month, we're going to talk about communication, right? The difference between communication and dialogue. That's what we're going to talk about today. Having deep communication, we're going to talk about next week. And then just some practical things about what it is that can trip people up in communication and what things we can be doing as husband and wife, as boyfriend and girlfriend, as friend to friend to have better communication.
Yeah.
So before we start, I wanted to start with a verse that we have heard before relating to communication in Ephesians, specifically Ephesians 4:29. I'm going to read it in two different versions because I think they're both really good. So the first one's from the ESV, and it says, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." The NLT, on the other hand, says, "Don't use foul or abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them." You know, so often we talk to couples and they tell us, you know what, we just can't communicate with each other. Mm-hmm. And one thing that we've realized over the years is oftentimes those couples don't have a communication problem. What they really have is a dialogue problem. So what we wanted to start with today is talking a little bit about just definition of terms. Because it could be that you and your spouse are saying you have a communication problem, but you might have a different kind of problem. So what we're going to do is talk a little bit about communication. So babe, why don't you kick that off?
Yeah.
Talking about communication.
So we were sitting at the kitchen table talking about what do you think the definition of communication is, and we both had sort of the same idea, but talked a little bit about I don't agree with that or whatever. Anyway, so I went to the Merriam-Webster dictionary and looked up their definition of communication, which is a process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behavior. So really usually through words, right?
Right.
So what are your thoughts on that definition? We kind of had we came to the same conclusion on this, I think, but it says, a process by which information is exchanged between individuals, and then for the purpose of what we're talking about is through words.
Yeah, so let's maybe brainstorm, you and I, some ways that we would say generally people communicate.
Yeah.
Right, so you've got verbal, but verbal has tons of different aspects to it, right? You've got everything from, when a pastor gets up at the pulpit on Sunday morning, he's communicating.
Yes.
Right? He's communicating something to the people.
Going to a seminar.
That's right. Yeah. Going to a seminar, that's communication.
You're receiving communication.
Exactly. A lot of times when we go to concerts or comedy shows or any of those kinds of things, those are forms of communication.
Right.
The thing that I think you and I struggled with that definition is it talks about the exchange of information. And that, I really don't know that that's an accurate way of describing communication, because a lot of those ideas we just came up with, there's not any exchange in that. It is a person imparting or transmitting information, but not necessarily receiving it back.
As I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, I think there is an exchange going on, but not an equal exchange. So if you think of a seminar, one person is imparting words, knowledge, whatever, and there is an exchange going on. You're getting nonverbal, or you're getting some body language, response back. In those, we're communicating with
I
an
just
audience,
thought of that.
right? But but in our circumstance, we're not often getting response back. But in seminars and in sermons and all that sort of thing, there is an exchange. It's just an unequal exchange, right?
Yeah, right.
But yeah, it's pretty unequal. It's more one-sided.
Right.
So I think we were talking about what you were about to say. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just is that communication in those examples are really not so much of an exchange. They're more an imparting of information.
Right. And the problem with that is it can be a really frustrating thing for the person that's receiving the download of information, because you don't have an equal opportunity to respond to what people are saying. And I'm sure,
or maybe it's not frustrating because that's the expectation.
Maybe. Yeah. You mean like at a church service or
right.
a show or something like that. Right. But I would imagine that, there are times when you're listening to something and you go, man, I would like to ask a question about what that person just said, or I'd like some more information about that. And not being able to get that can be frustrating, for sure. This really leads into kind of starting to talk a little bit about how communication and dialogue differ, because oftentimes what happens with communication within a relationship is you have two parties that are both imparting information to each other, but there's no movement towards mutual understanding and growth. Right? There's, when you take communication, and maybe you have a boss maybe that was like this in the past, or a manager, whatever the structure is where you work, but where you sit down with that person and they just sort of download this, here's what I thought of that last project you did, or here's what I've thought of your last year with the company, and they tick through these things and then that's it. Right? I mean, that we would look at that, most people I think would look at that and go, well, that's a bad manager.
Right.
Because they just downloaded this stuff to me. There was no discussion of what I think about that, or what things I can do to improve, or what I think of the company, or any of that. And that's really frustrating.
My side of things.
Right. Now, to take that analogy a step further, oftentimes, if that happens over a period of time, what's somebody going to do with that company? They're going to leave,
right,
and go find a different job.
Right.
Well, the problem is that same model of one-sided, unequal communication, where I'm just going to download what I feel about a situation to Andrea, and without an opportunity to try and reach resolution or come to a mutual understanding, I'm just going to download this, and then she's just going to download it to me. Problem is, over time, what we see is a lot of marriages that get to a place where one or the other goes, well, I'm just gonna quit and find a new company.
And it's usually downloading when a situation has come to a frustrating point.
Right.
It's not downloading over time. It's downloading when this is a problem. Right.
I mean, that certainly is true, and oftentimes that can make it worse, because it's built up and built up and built up.
Right.
But then there's still not any understanding at the end of that. So babe, with that kind of foundation of what communication is, why don't you kind of lead us into what dialogue is, and then we'll kind of talk about the two together.
Dialogue is again, according to Merriam-Webster dictionary, is a conversation between two or more persons. Simple definition, but it's a conversation between two or more people.
Right.
So, communication is more of like giving information from one to another.
Mm-hmm.
Dialogue is information talked about between two people. So there's one person who's talking and another person who's responding, and
Right.
there's a give and take. There's a response to that.
Right.
There's an expectation of, I'm gonna give this information and you're gonna respond to that, and then maybe my thoughts change and I talk about that
Right.
again, and then he talks about his response to that.
Right. But I think implied in that definition for true dialogue is that there is a mutual goal with regards to that dialogue, right?
Yeah.
Because, so,
What's that goal? That you agree with everything I say, right?
wrong.
Right.
Wrong. But so often I think that's, we joke, but so often I think that's how people get into, that's what couples think of dialogue, right? Where it's not really what they're talking about is communication, where I'm going to tell you something and then you're going to tell me something, and then I'm going to restate what I told you, and then you're going to restate what you told me. And at some point, we're just going to keep banging our heads together until you agree with what I said. That's not dialogue. Dialogue is, at the end of the day, we're talking together for the purpose of resolution, not even always for the purpose of understanding. Because there may be times when you and I have dialogue, and at the end of the day, I have to go, I don't understand that.
And resolution is not being validated either, right? It's simply, it may not be I understand, it may not be I validate, but just I'm trying to communicate and you're trying to understand.
Right. Right.
And that's in the time that we're living in right now too.
Yeah.
This is such an important, it's funny, we started talking about our topics months ago, before any of this, the current situations had come up at all.
Right.
And
So if you're watching this, months or years down the road, it's 2020 right now when we shoot this, which was, highly do not recommend 2020 on Yelp. But basically, the two major things that have happened this year, the coronavirus happened, tragically, and as things often do, particularly here in the United States, it takes about 0.2 seconds before something becomes political. And certainly coronavirus has become political. So that's happening. Now, on the other hand, there is some huge, real difficult conversations going on right now with regards to differences between white and black, what role the police have to play in just really, frankly, American life at all. There are some American cities that have just gone full, reject the United States, reject the Constitution, that whole deal. And so, of course, that overtly has become political. And so with that background...
And another thing that's come up a lot lately is the child sex trafficking.
Yeah.
And there's huge differences of opinion in that small majority, maybe.
Yeah, I freaking hope so.
But
yeah. So anyway, with that background, babe, you were talking about how communication has come up just at right.
Yeah. So right. So there's been some big communication problems going on now, and so this isn't just for couples or relationships or whatever, but it's even in conversations, dialogue, communication that we're having with people about current events.
Right. And I'd say a lot more communication going on than dialogue, frankly.
Right.
It's a lot of people.
Word vomit.
Right. A lot of people sort of, just shooting back and forth at each other with no real, as far as I can tell, by and large, no real desire to come to any sort of resolution or understanding. And that really is directly related. I mean, this is a marriage channel. That's what we talk about, marriage and family. And man, so often we've sat down with couples, and for that matter, been a couple that had no real interest in resolution. When we were at a bad place in our marriage, I just wanted to tell you how I felt and why you were wrong, and had no real interest in hearing back
same here.
from you. And so babe, what's the result of communication versus the result of dialogue in your opinion? How does that play out?
The result? So communication, just imparting ideas or thoughts or maybe even feelings, is so one-sided. It doesn't build relationship. It doesn't build really anything. It's just selfish.
How do you mean?
In relationship, it's selfish. So it's not desiring communication in relationship. The lack of dialogue in relationship can really be a lack of caring to hear the other side, caring to again, I said can be, lack of caring to understand the other person, and really lack of wanting to be challenged, maybe, in my own thoughts, feelings, actions.
Sure.
So if I'm just communicating one-sided, just giving, telling you, and not asking or wanting for your communication in response to that, I feel like it's selfish, and and maybe it's fear based, because I don't want to be challenged and that sort of thing. Or maybe it's I'm communicating but I'm not getting anything in response. Maybe I'm wanting that but I'm not getting that, and there's a whole host of reasons that could be happening, but either way, it fails to build relationship. It fails to allow for deeper level of intimacy, and I don't mean that in a sexual way, but I mean that in a relational way. I mean, I have deeper levels of intimacy with friends, with Nathan, with my children, when I have dialogue, as opposed to just one-sided.
Sure. And I would say too, because this may be something that somebody out there is struggling with, this is certainly a good way to get the inside track on having a better intimate sexual relationship as well.
With your spouse, yeah.
As far as pursuing intimacy through deeper communication and dialogue, because I know certainly for you and I, when we're taking time to sit down and have a deeper level of dialogue with each other, the sex part of it follows.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely helpful.
Right. So dialogue, how does dialogue differ, or does it differ, when you're talking about a confrontational situation versus just daily, right? Is dialogue something that we just do when we're having a fight, or is dialogue something that is a daily challenge? Is there room in married life for just communication? I mean, does that have a place? What are your thoughts on that?
That was a lot of questions in one.
Yeah, so let's take first, is there a place, do you think, for just one-sided communication?
Is there a place for it?
Within relationship,
Sure.
within marriage?
Sure. I think there are definitely times where conversation is just going to be one-sided, so that it's not conversation, it's just communicating something. Maybe it's, I'm going to tell you about my day and it was really great or it was really bad, and I'm just giving you facts. I'm just telling you about something.
Sure.
And that's all there is to it, you know? I kind of want to leave it behind, but I'm going to tell you about it. I think there are definitely times where that's happened for both of us.
Right. So.
And then there are also times, which
Yeah.
you're probably thinking about right now, where I'm mulling over an issue or dealing with an issue. I do not want dialogue on this issue. I just want you to know what's going on, but I don't want advice, and I don't want you to think it through with me. I'm just letting you in on what's going on, and that's it. And so the kind thing to do is say, I'm just letting you know, and I don't want advice.
Right. And
I don't want dialogue about this.
That's right. And particularly guys, because the way we're wired to be problem solvers. And so particularly with the women in our wives and our daughters in particular that we care for, we, as soon as there's any sort of even inkling of maybe a situation that's a problem, we want to ride in with our white horse and save the day. And that's great, and that's an admirable thing. And there are times when that may be exactly what you want. Mm-hmm. But there are also times when me jumping right into a list of here's how you solve this issue might really rub you the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sometimes feels like, oh, well, you know all, or
right. Sure.
Oh, of course, this is the answer, you know, to my problem. You know, it just feels like defeating sometimes. Right.
So I think a discipline to work into your marriage or your relationship would be to just use those words of communication and dialogue, right? To be able to say, babe, I want to communicate something to you, right? And that even in and of itself, you know, once you've kind of talked through these definitional things, can send the message to your spouse, okay, he or she's just trying to tell me something. Mm-hmm. They're not necessarily looking to have some back and forth. Another thing you can do is ask, hey, is this something you want to dialogue about?
Yeah.
Right? Is this something you want to have a back and forth discussion about?
Right.
You know, I also think that it's a good discipline as a couple to sit down, you know, when you, as we have recommended and continue to recommend, as you take at least once a week time out for your marriage on whether it's a date out. Tell us what that's like, because with all of our kids, we don't get to do that as much as we'd like. Or a day in, which is what we do, where it's just you're specifically not watching TV or whatever. You're coming together as a couple. I think that's a great time to ask the question, how has our communication and dialogue been this last week? Because I think it gives freedom to each other to say, man, I feel like we've communicated a lot of stuff this week, but I don't feel like we've really dialogued about much.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, that's good.
So how does dialogue differ in a confrontational situation versus just daily life? I believe that was the second question I asked earlier.
For me, I usually don't want dialogue in a confrontational situation. I want to tell you how you were wrong and have you accept that. Let's move on.
Right. The problem, of course, is I want to do the same thing,
right.
and then it becomes craziness.
Right. The best way, of course, in a tense situation is to be open to dialogue, to tell you whatever I'm hurt by and how that makes me feel, and then be ready and willing to hear the response to that.
Right.
And then ask for, if that wasn't already told, you know, how are you feeling and how do we get, you know, how are we going to help each other solve this and that sort of thing. So that's really an ideal world.
Right.
And a lot of times we're able to do that when we're disagreeing, but not all the time.
Sure. Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, I would say one thing for us that worked about that is sometimes in the moment when you're really feeling the emotion of the situation, that's probably not a great time to have a dialogue.
Yeah,
about
because the heat's
something.
been turned up, and
Right.
and yeah, maybe you're really frustrated, and
Totally.
so we have found that sometimes in those moments we say, you know, let's not talk about this right now, but let's come back in half an hour, whatever that
Right.
is, and then purpose to come, like, do it. You know, don't just sweep it under the rug and say, oh, okay, well, we're over it.
Right.
We got over that one. But actually come back in whatever time you designated and talk about it, and then cooler heads prevail a lot of times in those circumstances.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's great. And it could be, particularly if you've been in a real rough spot in your marriage, or there's been some infidelity or things like that that have really rocked your marriage. It may be more than a, hey, let's come back together in half an hour and talk about it. It may be that you need to pick a day and just say, hey, this day each week, we're going to come together and talk about this
Sure.
particular issue.
Sure.
Right? And maybe it's not something as dramatic as infidelity. Maybe it's just, hey, we need to figure out where we're going to send our kids for school. You know, what are we going to do? You know, we're looking for a new church. Where are we going to go to church? Right? Those things that can be contentious, to be able to decide, all right, this day on Tuesday, after we put the kids to bed, we're going to talk through this issue. And both parties know, we're able to wrap our heads around it and really come together that day with the common goal of dialoguing on that issue.
Yeah, and the dialogue is usually a lot more worthwhile and rich.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right, totally. Yeah, that's exactly right. No, that's great. So, babe, maybe a challenge and a tip that we could give for this next week with regards to dialogue, so that we leave you guys with something, you know, maybe if this is an area you're realizing, hey, we really could grow in the area of communication versus dialogue, you know, how could we give them something maybe practical they could do with regards to dialoguing?
Well, I'm going to give you a tip that is going to feel really childish, maybe at first, but I would really encourage you to do it anyway. And it's something that, so will you grab that ball over there?
Yeah. Oh, what do you know? It's right here.
So this is something that is going to feel really awkward, but I'm telling you, if you just have to get through the awkward moments to get to good dialogue,
yeah,
it's worth it, right?
Totally.
So I have a ball here, and where this came from, at least from my memory, is my mom used to teach my brother and me to pass the ball when we were younger, pass the conversation ball. So when we were younger, you know, you just talk about yourself. When I'm thinking about one of our children who's a conversationalist, and he's a good communicator, but he doesn't often dialogue.
He's getting better.
He's definitely getting better, but
yeah.
He's just at that age. So kids just think about themselves and they want to talk about everything about themselves. Anyway, so my mom, you know, harped on us for years and years and years about learning how to pass the conversation ball and asking about the other person and responding to what they have to say, all that sort of thing. So that's where this comes from. And it's such a great picture that we're going to actually use the ball to do it. So I have a ball here, and for the people listening who are wondering what the heck we're doing, I have a ball in my hand, and I'm going to have dialogue with Nathan using a ball. And this is going to be good for people who maybe you're realizing, I talk a lot and I don't listen a lot. I talk a lot, but I don't know that I know that much about other people. Or I talk a lot in my marriage, and I don't. My spouse does not really talk a lot. Well, use the conversation ball. So, hey Nathan, how was your day today? And I'm gonna pass the ball to Nathan, because now the ball means it's his chance to talk, right? So he's gonna tell me.
It was good. I coached some baseball games and got to spend some time doing that. It was a lot of fun. How was your day? then I'll pass the ball back.
My day was great. I went to some baseball games and hung out with the kids, and it was a gorgeous day. I loved that. What do you feel like was the most challenging part of coaching your baseball games today? And then I passed the ball to him.
Right, and so as you pass this back and forth, part of the benefit of it is that it makes, when you're holding the ball, it makes you think, hey, I need to pass this ball back to the other person.
Right.
And you know,
it doesn't, and you can hold on to it and talk for a long time. That's fine, but the ball helps you think it's my turn to talk, and so I want to say what I'm thinking and feeling, but I also need to allow the other person time to say what they're thinking and feeling, or
right.
Their response to me or whatever.
Right, and it also, if you do not have the ball, helps you to remember to not do something that can really destroy dialogue, and that's interrupt.
Yes.
So often when you hear someone else speaking, you start formulating your thoughts on how you want to respond, and pretty soon you just start trying to think of that, right? We've all done this, be honest, that where you're like, okay, I just need them to stop talking for like, exactly, and you start going, and all that tells the other person is, I'm not listening to anything you're saying anymore, I'm just trying to respond to you. Right, and it is killer in marriage, because it really sends the message to your spouse that I really don't value what you're saying right now. I'm just trying to respond to you. And so the ball can help. And look, yeah, is it a childish thing? Well, probably, but I think the question that we've asked before on this channel and that we continue to ask is, what's your marriage really worth to you? Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, if you're listening to this and you're going, well, my marriage is really important as long as I don't have to feel childish, then you're a child and you should grow up, because that's not, your marriage needs to be more important to you than that type of thing. Marriage is difficult. We've talked about that a lot. And I say that maybe it sounded harsh, but I'm talking as someone who was a child in my marriage. Right. And so I'm sensitive to that, because the bottom line is your marriage is so important, and your spouse is so important, one, to the Lord, and two, should be to you, that we all have to reach that place where we go, hey, if dialogue is poor in my relationship, I will do anything to fix it. Instead of taking the easy out of going, well, communication in my marriage will be great when Andrea gets her act together, right? I mean, let's not be people that fall into that trap, right? Let's take any tool we can get, and this ball's a great tool, right? It's not going to fix communication in your marriage, but it does help to train you to pursue better dialogue, right, in your marriage.
It's okay to be slow to speak. So I have learned that as an adult, because it hurts me when I'm interrupted, and it hurts me when somebody is clearly not listening to what I'm saying, because all they're thinking about is what they have to say. And so I've learned that being slow to speak is okay, because that means I'm usually really listening to what the other person has to say, and really trying to think about that, and really trying to mull that over while they're talking. And then if my response is slow to come, that's okay.
Yeah.
And with the ball, that makes it so much easier. If Nathan passes me the ball, again, it's a learning process. We don't still use the ball, but he knows that I can sometimes be slow to respond, because I'm just thinking about my response. I'm thinking about what he had to say.
Sure.
So with the ball, if he passes it to me, okay, well, I'm free to then listen while he's talking, and then have some time to think about what I want to say in response, because I have the ball, and I'm doing our relationship and our conversation a service, not a disservice, by really trying to listen and really trying to think about how I feel and what I want to say.
Right.
So.
Right, and I would say as we kind of bring this to a close, the other big thing I hope you've heard us saying in our conversation today is a big part of dialogue is listening, right? It's looking the other person in the eye and listening to what they're saying, right? I mean, this is someone, in the case of marriage, this is someone that you have committed your life to caring, loving, and respecting that person, looking into their eyes and really trying to hear what they're saying and process that, right? Not just hearing the words, but really listening to the heart that's behind those words, right? Because you may be hearing your spouse say something really angrily, but are you actually listening to what's behind those words? There's pain behind those words that's motivated by life experiences, by past hurts. When we really start listening to our spouse, it opens up this whole world of understanding into who that person is, and allows us to, one, understand them better, and two, love them better.
I was going to say that it shows so much love to do that.
Right. Right. So this week, as you guys, as a couple, dig into both communication and dialogue, I'd encourage you, use those words as you talk, right? As you think back on the day, spend some time communicating, right? There's some time when you and her or you both get home from work, or one of you gets home from work, and there's a time of, let me communicate to you what happened during my day, and you communicate to me what happened during your day. But then I would challenge you, take some time to dialogue, right? Pick a topic and have some back and forth communication for better understanding. Maybe there's a topic you've been avoiding talking about, right? Spend some time specifically saying, let's dialogue about that tonight. Start working those words into your marriage. It will improve the communication, right, in your marriage, that buzzword, that overall conversation piece of your marriage. That will definitely improve. And I think it will give you opportunities to really have a better understanding of who your spouse is.
Yeah, that was great.
Perfect. All right, guys.
Yeah, so tomorrow is Testosterone Tuesday. So that's for the guys.
That's right. New topic.
Yep. And then Women Power Wednesday, Thirsty Thursday, Family Friday, the diary on the weekend. And then it's a new week.
That's right.
And so we're talking about a lot of good things in August.
That's right.
And hopefully you guys are ramping up for school starting and all that jazz.
That's right.
So praying for you guys as all that starts up again.
It's great. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate you being here. And remember, God is for your marriage.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Marriage by Design. If you were impacted by this video, like it by hitting the thumbs up below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and once you subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes release.
Excellent. Also, one of the huge pillars of our show is interactivity between us and you. So we would love you to comment down in the comments below if you have thoughts about this video, or if you have questions or other things you'd like to see considered in the future. In addition, if you'd like, you can email us. That's marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram @marriagebydesignpodcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching Marriage by Design Podcast. Finally, if you want to, you can tweet at us. We do have a Twitter account that is @MarriageXDesign. Thanks, and have a great day.